Welcome, and today's exploration will take us to San Francisco, New Mexico, and the glorious city of Edinburgh. I do hope you enjoy. And here, super quick, I'm looking at pictures of the World's Fair in San Francisco in 1915, and this is what's referred to as the Palace of Fine Arts. And really, I love this building, but aside from pure beauty, an absolutely pointless investment for a World's Fair. Absolutely pointless. Here we can see the scale. I love pictures of this palace with people because we get an idea of just how massive this thing is. And again, you can't store anything in this structure, completely open to the air and the elements. And in 1915, in a past video, I showed 1915, original photos, renderings, film footage, and what we could see is in 1915, these trees were already here. They were about half the size, and oftentimes in strange places, growing in between the columns, something that would never be acceptable if this really was such a cherished structure. And really, this video that I just finished, I show this Palace of Fine Arts, as you can see here, and these columns are all busted up and not seeming like brand new construction at all. And here I saved a few pictures that I thought were very telling of this structure. Pictures with people, often being wedding photos. And here we go. And what is this? Again, why invest this much money in an open-air structure of this nature, surrounded by water, very little function aside from a little stroll and a peaceful retreat? Such a structure would cost millions today, and again, with no function other than sheltering from the rain or sun. And yet we see this same layout for structures found all throughout our realm. Sometimes what reminds me of some wings, or as I have shown in the Vatican, reminding me of crab pinchers. But regardless, always displaying this dome and this type of half circle consisting of columns. Do these buildings have a functional role, some type of tech lost to us? Or are they a representation of our realm? Even the Bible, speaking of the dome resting on pillars, and perhaps both. And here we can have a look at the fine detail in the columns, almost resembling fountains of water. And here, these women appear to be mourning. And again, what is the true meaning of all of this? What is in the box? And here again, a look at perspective, and how old could this really be? Clearly much older than we've been told. And the destination of my next exploration, absolutely astounding and full of symbolism that would mean nothing to the early Americans in 1915. Not then, and not now. And one more thing, this is becoming a touchy subject amongst this community, and of course I'll say I don't know, because I don't, only trying to piece things together. And we see thousands of tunnels in mountains with brick. And I'm not going to speak on any one particular place, because there are so many. And no doubt, many of the giant stones that we see are the remains of building, rebar and concrete. And then there seems to be another era, perhaps a people from a different time, before a different reset, that were not builders of concrete and steel. And again, I don't know, only hypothesizing. But I'm speaking to the people that built with brick. And what we see is these super complex brick tunnel systems found in mountains. And does it make any sense that somebody would brick tunnels inside of a mountain? Now, if there were already tunnels and cave systems, you already have support. And what need, in such an early time period, to be wasting this much brick inside a tunnel in a mountain? Doesn't really make sense, especially not for some monastery. What makes more sense is that this tunnel system was simply part of a massive building that was hit with such a force from the top, either a weapon or something related to the luminaries above, or possibly some superheated volcanic ash. But regardless, such a force and such a high heat, turning these massive structures into rubble, unrecognizable as a structure, and we call it mountain. And then when we go in these tunnels, we see things like this, in these cave systems, really making no sense. And for my last video, many people asked where this was. A fascinating castle and a fine line between natural looking stone and the work of man. And this beauty is located in Poland, said to have been built in the 14th and 15th century. And here is the name of the town in Poland. Forgive me, I don't want to butcher it. And we'll touch on this place a little more in my next video. For now, let's look at something else. Here is a national park in New Mexico. It's called Bandelier National Monument, near Los Alamos. And they call this the Cave Kiva. And absolutely ridiculous to call such things caves. And this is a fascinating picture, not one that we typically see, and I look forward to exploring this place in person very soon. And what do I see here? If I knew nothing at all, what would I see? It's certainly not a cave, not a natural cave. Maybe up here this could be mistaken as natural somehow. Not sure what they would tell us. Perhaps lava dripping underwater and re-solidifying. Not sure what the official narrative would proclaim. And in short, I think what we see here is the remains of structure that has had some super hot liquid flowing over it. We could imagine that the top of this very structure is flowing in and down on itself, succumbing to much more heat, and this is what the windows and entryways look like, melting in on themselves, leaving smaller openings, and down here, for whatever reason, a little evidence of the true nature of this otherwise seeming mountain reveals itself. Absolutely fascinating discovery. And again, what does it mean to be a national monument? It means to be owned by the government, controlled, certain parts given access to the public, and others not. And here a look at what the tourists typically see, and what they are told is that these were carved out. And I really look forward to climbing in some of these windows or doorways and seeing what's left of these buildings. It's unclear as to what may have done this, really reminding me of ruins we would see in Turkey, but in a much more deteriorated state. And in some parts, we can see what are clearly structural columns, and in others, almost completely unrecognizable. And again, the Park Service doing their best to convince us that these are primitive dwellings, carved out by hand, and I don't think anybody needs an explanation on how ridiculous this seems. Now, this is really exciting to me. I really enjoy this type of research, and even more so that this is in my neck of the woods, and I look forward to exploring this in person very soon. And this is very interesting. A little look from inside of one of these openings. And of course, I'm trying to wrap my head around what one of these structures may have looked like. Do we have anything left today that may have been even more preserved? And of course, everything that we're looking at here is from a past reset. Certainly not the last one. The last one seems to have brought us the mud flood, and much of the infrastructure and architecture of the past reset seems to have survived, having this Phoenician, Romanesque type architecture, and the last reset seeming to have removed the populations but left everything else in good enough condition to where it could be repurposed and redesignated for our present time and people. But this reset, unclear how long ago this may have actually been, and I would not have liked to have been around for this one, seeming to have been very violent and rendering the artificial into what otherwise looks natural. Inconceivable to our small minds, imagining buildings the size of mountains, and such evidence as this allowing us the opportunity to begin wrapping our minds around this notion and possibility. And perhaps we'll see what either the mainstream historians or geologists have to say, always being quick to explain away the wonders of this realm. And this was just shared with me in a comment. I appreciate this. By the Chaotist. Excellent share. Originally it was in the spam folder. And before I turn off my brain, I thought I'd have one last share. And these are photos attributed to a David Hill and Robert Adamson, a pair of Scottish photographers working in the 1840s. They are best known for their portraits, but also created a few city views. And these photos are in Edinburgh, Scotland. 1840, and their age and authenticity seem pretty legit, and I don't know how long they thought they could perpetuate this narrative, but over 150 years is pretty good. Maybe one can't expect much more out of a lie, and perhaps one didn't need more than 150 plus years. But here what we see is an image titled "A View of the Old Town." The old town, the old primitive town. And again, this photo, 1843, which means we would have to be given a date of construction of the early 1800s at a minimum. We don't need to discuss the means available to the people of that time when it comes to construction, and especially vertical construction. Vertical construction is usually a consideration taken when you're dealing with limited space, and this makes no sense in this early time period. And aside from these very tall, jam-packed buildings, what I like most about this image is this amazing piece of tech towering here in the background next to this dome. And this is super high tech. Really mind-blowing. What building is this? Please let me know if any of you know. Anything with a top like this has got to be pretty impressive. And moving on, we get a look in 1844, a view from Calton Hill. 1844. What kind of skills have we lost? What kind of people have we degraded into, in which our old world looks 1,000 times more glorious than any town or city we produce today? And clearly we didn't degrade. A person might forget something in his lifetime, but not a collective people. A people as a whole do not forget how to build things that they supposedly were able to do without electricity, without cranes, and what we call modern technologies, which we're now discovering are primitive compared to the past. And just to look at this crappy fence here, the type of fence we would build today, revealing this point completely. Here you have this massive and perfect, glorious wall with castle-like features, and then this fence built by a modern inheritor of this glorious residence. Fascinating. Seeming to be all brick. And here a bank, the National Commerce Bank. Absolutely stupid. This is so old and weathered and seeming to be in the process of being repaired at best. Perhaps adding windows and doors. Here again a view from the same hill, this Calton Hill in 1844. And here again, the old town. Oh, the ye old town, built by peasants, primitive. Nothing could be further from the truth. and absolutely amazing buildings. Old world buildings. And really seeming like they're in ruins in the late years of their lives. And these looking like the types of buildings that would resemble these caves in New Mexico that we were just looking at, if they were rocked with a massive cataclysmic event. And this is really fascinating. This reminding me of something in my past video in Cincinnati, Ohio, that we could see towering up on a hilltop. This image didn't turn out as well as some of the others, but very fascinating. And again, I thank you for this share. Here's a picture from Rock Springs, Wyoming that I'll feature in my next video. But for today, I thank you for joining me, and do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And how might we find more evidence of melted buildings and ultimately a past civilization? A civilization from a past reset. And here I've done a little search for castle mountains and caves. And this type of research is so far ahead of its time, there will be very little censoring or even the thought of doing such things, because there's very little understanding. And now when we begin looking at these caves, we can begin seeing them in a different light. Absolutely opportune places to repurpose, and we are just privy to the surface. And while most people are focused on these center points, such as this Buddha, not really seeing the bigger picture. And what kind of buildings are we seeing here? If we're using our modern thinking, we won't recognize it as building, because in our realm, building to us is equated with cube or tall rectangles, sharp corners, and so naturally, when looking in the natural world, seeming natural world, we don't see building initially. We don't build buildings like this, and this being more of a Tower of Babel type building. If you've ever seen images of the Tower of Babel, it's more of a round and tapering into a cone, narrow at the top, gradual incline, wrapping around, spiraling to the top. And this place we're looking at right here seems to be such a similar thing. This being in Cappadocia, Turkey. And it's called Castle Mountain. And perhaps there was a lot of glass and metals and different materials in which we can see imprints of, and making so much more sense that this is old building as opposed to people carving this out here in Turkey, back in New Mexico, and all throughout our realm. And again, a very violent reset this must have been. Some seeming to be by water, and clearly some by fire.